My name is Maya Bennett. I'm 24 years old, and until 3 days ago, I thought the worst thing my family had ever done was make me feel invisible. I was wrong. The worst thing they ever did was wait until I was asleep, press my thumb against my own phone, open my banking app, and drain $88,000 from the account I had spent 6 years building. That money was not fun money. It was not vacation money. It was my emergency fund, my down payment. The only proof I had that leaving home at 18 had not broken me. I found out the next morning while sitting at the kitchen table, still half asleep, listening to my parents cry about a medical emergency they said could not wait. They told me my sister was sick. They told me insurance would not cover the treatment. They told me every hour mattered. And when I saw the transfer on my screen and asked why $88,000 had left my account at 2 in the morning, my mother sobbed harder, like I was the one hurting her. My father looked me straight in the face and asked what kind of daughter cared more about money than saving her own sister's life. I actually apologized. I said I was sorry for reacting badly. I said I was just shocked. I let them convince me that being robbed was somehow my moral failure. Then a few days later, one Instagram story loaded on my phone, and everything they told me turned into the ugliest lie I had ever seen. Before I tell you what was in that video and what I did after I saw it, tell me this. What time is it for you right now? And where are you watching from? I want to know how far this story travels before my family realizes the truth did not stay buried. The Instagram story started with music so loud I almost dropped my phone. At first, I did not understand what I was looking at. I was sitting on the edge of my bed in my apartment in Seattle, still wearing the same hoodie I had slept in, trying to convince myself that giving up $88,000 had been the right thing to do. I had barely eaten for 2 days because every time I opened my banking app, that empty space in my savings made my stomach twist. But I kept hearing my father's voice in my head, asking what kind of monster counted money while her sister needed help. So when my younger brother Noah's Instagram story popped up, I tapped it without thinking. The first video showed my older sister Sienna dancing on the deck of a yacht with Dubai's skyline glittering behind her. She was laughing, spinning in a white designer dress, holding a glass of champagne like she was in a music video. For one stupid second, my brain tried to protect me. Maybe this was old. Maybe it was a repost. Maybe she had gone before she got sick. Then the next slide loaded. My mother, Caroline Bennett, was standing beside her, wearing oversized sunglasses, kissing the side of a champagne bottle like she had just won a lottery. The slide after that showed my father, Grant Bennett, standing in front of a penthouse window, raising a glass toward the camera. Then came Noah's selfie, grinning in a hotel bathroom made of marble, and the caption at the bottom said, "Finally living like we deserve. Thanks, little sister, for the loan, LOL." I read it once, then again, then a third time, because my hands had started shaking so hard the words blurred. There was no hospital. There was no emergency treatment. There was no uncovered procedure. My sister was not lying in some clinic fighting for her life. She was dancing on a yacht in Dubai with money stolen from my account, while my parents celebrated like they had earned it. The worst part was not even the money. It was the memory of myself sitting at that kitchen table, apologizing to the people who had robbed me in my sleep. I took screenshots of every slide. I screen recorded the story before Noah could delete it. Then I opened my email and searched my bank's name. There it was, in the trash folder. A transfer confirmation I had never seen because someone had deleted it from my phone before I woke up. The transfer had gone through at 2:13 a.m. while I was passed out in my childhood living room. I called my bank so fast I barely remember dialing. When the fraud department picked up, my voice sounded calm in a way that scared me. I told them I was reporting an unauthorized transfer made through biometric access while I was asleep. I told them I had screenshots proving the reason my family gave me was false. I told them I worked in fraud analysis, and I needed every account connected to that transaction flagged immediately. The woman on the phone stopped using her polite customer service voice after that. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. She asked if the people who accessed my phone had physical access to me again. I said no. She put my account into security lockdown, disabled biometric login, opened an investigation, and told me the receiving account would be frozen pending review if the funds were still traceable. Then she said something that made the room go cold. She told me this was not a family misunderstanding. This was identity theft. She advised me to file a police report. I told her I would. But before I did that, there was one person I needed to call, because my parents had one secret they were even more afraid of losing than my money. My grandmother, Evelyn Harper, answered on the third ring, and before I could even say hello, she knew something was wrong. She had always known. When I left home at 18, she was the only person who did not ask me what I had done to upset my parents. She just showed up with a used laptop, a grocery card, and a list of apartment buildings that rented to young people with almost no credit history. She told me back then that becoming independent was not betrayal, it was survival. So when I called her that night, staring at the screenshots on my phone, I did not try to soften anything. I told her my mother and father had used my thumb while I slept. I told her they had taken $88,000. I told her they claimed it was for Sienna's medical treatment, and then I sent her the videos of Sienna dancing on a yacht. My grandmother did not speak for almost a full minute. I could hear her breathing on the other end, slow and controlled, which somehow scared me more than if she had yelled. Finally, she said, "Maya, send me everything." I sent the screenshots, the bank alert, the deleted email confirmation, the transfer time, and Noah's caption. Then she asked me one question. "Do you want me to stop helping them?" That was the first time I fully understood how much power she still had over my parents' lives. For 3 years, my parents had been receiving automatic payments from what they called an old family investment account. It covered part of their mortgage, their car insurance, some utilities, and sometimes even their credit card minimums. They thought it was some passive payout they were entitled to. What they did not know was that my grandmother had created the trust herself because she felt guilty watching her daughter and son-in-law spiral financially while pretending they were wealthier than they were. She had not wanted them homeless. She had not wanted Noah dragged down by their bad choices. But she had also told me once, very quietly, that if she ever learned they were abusing that help, she would shut it down with one phone call. That night, she made the call. I did not scream. I did not beg. I did not ask her to destroy them. I only said, "Grandma, please stop paying for people who stole from me and called it love." She said she understood. By morning, every automatic payment from the Harper Family Trust had been suspended pending legal review. At 9:16 a.m., my mother called me 17 times in a row. I did not answer. At 9:42, the first voicemail came in. Her voice was not soft anymore. It was cracked and panicked. "Maya, what did you do?" "The mortgage payment bounced. The bank says we have until tomorrow to cure the default or they move forward. Please call me. Please God, call me." The second voicemail was my father. He was not crying. He was furious. He said I had no idea what kind of damage I was causing. He said if I was behind this, I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The third voicemail was my mother again, this time sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "They are going to take the house. Do you want us on the street? Is this what you want?" I listened to every message and saved them in a folder named Evidence. The old me would have called back. The old me would have felt responsible for fixing the disaster they created. But the new me sat at my kitchen table, looked at the bank case number on my screen, and realized something important. I had not made them broke. I had only stopped someone else from secretly keeping them comfortable. That difference mattered. Still, I did not feel powerful. I felt sick. Because even after everything they had done, some part of me was still trained to hear my mother cry and wonder if I was the cruel one. Then my Aunt Rachel called, and I learned my parents had already started rewriting the story. Aunt Rachel did not waste time pretending this was a normal family call. She asked me if my parents had really taken money from my account, and when I said yes, she cursed under her breath in a way I had never heard from her before. Rachel was my grandmother's younger sister, a head nurse, the kind of woman who could smell a lie before it finished leaving someone's mouth, but even she had almost fallen for them. My parents had shown up at her house that morning with my mother crying and my father pacing her porch like a man being hunted. They told her there had been a banking error. They said I had misunderstood a family loan, panicked, and somehow gotten their accounts frozen. They needed $20,000 before the end of the day, or the house would go into foreclosure proceedings. My mother apparently told Rachel I was having an emotional episode because I had always been sensitive about Sienna. That was the word she used. Sensitive. Not robbed. Not betrayed. Sensitive. Rachel said she had been 5 minutes away from transferring the money when something felt wrong, so she called my grandmother. That was when Evelyn told her the truth. The sickness story. The 2:13 a.m. transfer. The deleted email. The Dubai videos. The caption thanking me for the loan. Rachel went quiet after telling me this, then said, "Honey, I am so sorry." That apology nearly broke me because it was the first one I had received from anyone connected to my family. Not from the people who stole from me, but from someone who had simply heard what happened and understood it was wrong. By lunchtime, my phone became unusable. Cousins I had not spoken to in years started texting me. Some said family problems should stay private. Some said money could be replaced, but parents could not. One aunt told me a daughter who made her mother cry would never know peace. Another cousin asked why I was acting like $88,000 mattered more than blood. I wanted to ask if blood was supposed to work only one way. I wanted to ask why nobody cared that my parents had touched my hand while I slept and used my own body like a password. Instead, I started building a timeline. I wrote down the date I arrived at my parents' house, the time I fell asleep, the transfer time, the breakfast conversation, the exact words my father used when he called me selfish, the Instagram posts, the bank call, the voicemails, the trust suspension. I put every screenshot into a folder. I backed it up twice. This was not revenge yet. This was protection. Then Sienna messaged me, not to explain, not to apologize. She wrote, "You are literally ruining my life because you have always been jealous of mine." She said I had no idea how hard it was to build a personal brand. She said she had already promised Dubai content to several small sponsors, and now I was making everyone look bad. I stared at that message for a long time because it told me everything. My sister was not afraid of being sick because she had never been sick. She was afraid of losing content. Noah messaged 10 minutes later saying I was being dramatic and that if I had just given them the money willingly, none of this would have happened. I almost responded. I almost wrote a paragraph explaining how consent works. But then Rachel sent me one more screenshot. It was from my mother's private story, posted less than an hour earlier. A gold dessert plate, a hotel balcony. The caption said, "Trying to breathe through a difficult season." They were still in Dubai, still spending, still pretending. That was the moment my guilt burned away and left something colder behind. They were not panicking because they hurt me. They were panicking because their safety net had disappeared. And when they realized no one was rushing to save them, they finally came home. My father called my workplace before he called me. That tells you everything about the kind of man he is. He did not want a conversation. He wanted access. He told the receptionist there was a family medical emergency and that his daughter was not answering her cell phone. Because people are kind when they think someone might be in danger, they transferred him to my department line. My manager pulled me aside before lunch with a worried look and asked if everything was okay at home. For a second, I was so embarrassed I could not speak. My family had already taken my money, my sleep, and my sense of safety. Now they were reaching into the one place where I had built a reputation they could not take credit for. I told my manager there was no medical emergency. I said I was dealing with a family fraud situation and that no one related to me should be given information or access. To his credit, he believed me immediately. Security was notified before the end of the hour. I thought that would be enough. It was not. When I left the building at 5:40, my parents were waiting near the parking garage. My mother looked smaller than I remembered, but I knew better than to trust that. My father looked angry enough to enjoy being angry. He stepped toward me like I was late for a meeting he had scheduled. I took out my phone and said, "I am recording this. If you do not want to be recorded, leave now." My mother started crying instantly. "Maya, please. We need to explain. You saw things out of context." My father said my tone was disrespectful. I told him the police report would be worse. That shut him up for 3 seconds, which was probably a personal record. Then the new version of the story began. My mother said Sienna had been scared she might be sick, but the diagnosis had been uncertain. She said they had already booked parts of the Dubai trip because the tickets were non-refundable, and once they found out Sienna was fine, they decided the family needed something healing after all the stress. I asked her why healing required stealing $88,000 from me at 2 in the morning. She flinched at the word stealing. My father stepped in and said I was twisting everything to make myself the victim. He said they had borrowed the money because they knew I would eventually understand. He said I was always too rigid, too obsessed with savings, too suspicious of people who loved me. My mother nodded like this was a diagnosis. She said, "We were trying to teach you that family matters more than numbers on a screen." I laughed. I could not help it. It came out sharp and ugly, and my father's face turned red. He said I was enjoying this. He said I had been waiting my whole life to punish them for loving Sienna more naturally because she did not fight them on everything. There it was. The truth, dressed up as an accusation. Loving her had been natural. Loving me had been work. I asked them what they wanted. My father said they needed me to call the bank and withdraw the fraud complaint. My mother said they needed my grandmother to turn the trust payments back on. Then my father added that I should help with a temporary loan, maybe $15,000, just to stabilize things while they figured out the mortgage. I stared at him because there are moments so insane they almost become funny. "You stole $88,000 from me," I said, "and your solution is that I give you more." My mother whispered that desperate people make mistakes. I told her mistakes happen by accident. What they did required waiting until I was unconscious, opening my phone with my thumb, transferring the money, deleting the confirmation, lying about a medical crisis, and then letting me apologize for being upset. That was not a mistake. That was a plan. My father pointed at me and said, "If they lost the house, every person in the family would know whose fault it was." I said, "Good. Then they could also know whose yacht trip caused it." My mother's tears stopped for just a second, and I saw anger underneath. Real anger. Not fear. Not regret. Anger that I was not playing my assigned role anymore. I told them they had 2 choices: leave my workplace now or wait for security. My father said I would regret humiliating him. I said he had confused consequences with humiliation because he had avoided both for too long. They left, but not before my mother said one last thing. She said, "I hope that money keeps you warm when you have no family left." I watched them drive away, saved the recording, and sent it to my lawyer and my grandmother. That night, I did not sleep much. I kept checking my locks. I kept checking my bank app. I kept expecting another disaster. In the morning, one arrived, but for once, it was not mine to carry. The email from the bank came at 8:12 a.m., and I read it 4 times before I believed it. Their investigation had found the transfer unauthorized. The $88,000 would be credited back to my account. The connected devices had been removed, and the receiving account had been closed pending further review. I sat at my desk and cried so quietly nobody noticed. It was not just relief. It was the shock of being believed by an institution when my own family had spent years teaching me that my version of reality was always wrong. The email also said the case had been marked as biometric identity misuse and referred to the appropriate fraud reporting channels. In plain English, my parents had not just lost access to my money, they had created a paper trail that would follow them into every bank, every loan application, and every desperate explanation they tried to give. I called my grandmother first. Evelyn listened without interrupting, then said, "Good. Now we make sure they cannot do this to anyone else." She told me something I had not known. The trust was nearly empty. 3 years of secret payments had not helped my parents get stable. It had helped them avoid reality. Every time the trust covered the mortgage, they spent their income somewhere else. Every time it covered insurance, they treated that as permission to upgrade something unnecessary. My grandmother said she had confused rescuing with helping, and she would not make that mistake again. The remaining money would not go toward their credit cards, the Dubai trip, or the mortgage. If there was a true emergency, she might pay directly for a short motel stay or groceries, but no cash would go into their hands. That decision spread through the family faster than any truth I had ever told. By noon, my phone lit up again. Sienna sent me voice messages so dramatic they could have been auditions. She said her life was over because she had to cancel content shoots. She said brands were asking why people were commenting fraud emojis under her posts. She said she had to sell 2 designer bags because our parents could not cover her credit card bill anymore. She said I had always wanted to drag her down to my level. For once, I did respond. I wrote, "My level is employed, housed, and not under fraud investigation. Try it." She blocked me, then unblocked me 20 minutes later to send another paragraph. Noah was different. At first, he sent the usual nonsense about family and forgiveness. Then, 2 days later, he asked if we could meet somewhere public. I almost said no, but curiosity won. We met outside a coffee shop near my apartment. He looked exhausted, like the Dubai tan had drained out of him and left a scared 21-year-old who had no idea how rent worked. He told me he had not known they used my thumb. He said our parents told him I had loaned them the money because Sienna had gone through a health scare, and then when the diagnosis turned out fine, everyone decided to use the money for a family trip. I asked him how that explanation had made any sense. He looked at the table and said, "Because they said you wanted us to have something nice." That hit me harder than I expected. Not because it excused him. It did not. But because I realized my parents had manipulated everyone in a different direction. To me, they made themselves desperate heroes. To Noah, they made me the generous sister. To the family, they made me unstable. To themselves, they were victims of my reaction. Noah apologized for the caption. It was awkward and not perfect, but it was the first real apology anyone in my immediate family had given me. I told him I was not ready to forgive him, but I would give him practical advice if he wanted to stop depending on them. We talked about getting a job, finding roommates, opening an account at a different bank, locking his credit, and making sure our parents did not use his name for loans. He listened like a person waking up in a burning house. Sienna never woke up. She kept posting sad quotes about betrayal and family wounds until people started asking why her comments were limited. My parents moved into Aunt Rachel's guest room after the foreclosure process officially started moving forward. Rachel let them stay for 2 weeks, no more, and made them sign a written agreement because she was not foolish enough to trust tears. My father called her cruel. My mother said everyone had abandoned them. Rachel said, "No, you spent years abandoning responsibility, and now responsibility found you." When I heard that, I almost smiled. By the end of the week, the relatives who had attacked me began disappearing from my messages. A few even apologized. Most simply went quiet, which told me they had finally seen the timeline. My parents had lost the money, the story, the house, and the audience. The only thing they still had was their pride, so they used it in the most predictable way possible. They sued me. I got served on a Tuesday evening while carrying groceries up to my apartment. The envelope was thick, official, and somehow less frightening than my mother's crying had been. That is how I knew I had changed. A month earlier, a voicemail from her could twist me into guilt for days. Now I was holding legal papers from both of my parents, and all I felt was tired. They were suing me for intentional emotional distress, financial interference, and breach of a verbal family agreement. According to their version, I had promised to provide emergency financial support, then maliciously reversed the transfer, destroyed their credit, and influenced my grandmother to cut them off. They wanted the $88,000 back, plus $30,000 for damages. I took the papers to my lawyer the next morning. She read the first page, looked at me over her glasses, and said, "This is not a lawsuit. This is a tantrum with filing fees." For the first time in weeks, I laughed. She filed a response with the bank finding, the police report, the screenshots, the deleted confirmation email, the recording from my workplace, and every voicemail where my parents admitted they knew exactly what money I was talking about. She also warned their attorney that if they continued making false claims, we would pursue fees and sanctions. 2 days later, my father wanted to meet. I said no at first. Then I thought about all the times they had talked over me, renamed my pain, and turned my silence into agreement. I agreed to one meeting in a public park near Rachel's house. I told them Rachel and my grandmother would be present. I told them I would record it. I told them if they shouted, I would leave. They still came. My mother looked pale. My father looked like a man who had been waiting all week to perform authority. Sienna came too, even though I had not invited her. Noah stood behind them, quiet and uncomfortable. My father started by saying we needed to clear up misunderstandings. I stopped him right there. I said, "There is no misunderstanding. You used my thumb while I slept. You took my money. You lied about Sienna being sick. You went to Dubai. You let me apologize. Then you tried to make me pay you again." My mother started crying and said they had been desperate. I said, "Desperate people ask for help. They do not commit fraud and call it parenting." She said families should not involve banks and police. I said families should not need banks and police to stop them from robbing their daughter. My father slammed his hand on the picnic table and said I was being cold, legalistic, and cruel. He said I had ruined them. I asked him if I had booked the penthouse. I asked if I had ordered the champagne. I asked if I had ignored the mortgage while spending stolen money overseas. He had no answer, so he did what he always did. He attacked who I was instead of what he had done. He said this was why they had always worried about me. He said I had no warmth, no loyalty, no softness. I told him softness was not the same as surrender. Loyalty was not the same as obedience, and warmth did not mean setting myself on fire so adults could avoid consequences. Sienna jumped in and said I had no idea how hard things were for her now. She had applied for receptionist jobs, and people were judging her because of the drama. I told her getting a job at 26 was not a tragedy. It was adulthood. Noah looked down, but he did not defend her. My mother whispered that they might have to stay in a weekly motel if Rachel made them leave. She asked if I really wanted my parents living like that. I told her what I wanted no longer mattered. Their choices had created their living situation. My job was not to rescue them from the ending they wrote. My grandmother finally spoke. She told my mother the trust was closed to her and Grant permanently. Any remaining funds would be used only at Evelyn's discretion, paid directly to necessities, never handed over. My father turned red and said we had all conspired against him. Rachel said, "No, Grant. You finally ran out of people willing to finance your lies." That was the sentence that ended the meeting. My father stood up and said if I walked away, I was no longer his daughter. I looked at him and realized those words had once been my greatest fear. Now they sounded like a door opening. I said, "Then this is the first boundary you have ever respected." My mother begged me not to leave. Sienna called me heartless. Noah said nothing, but when I walked away, he texted me later, "I am sorry. I am going to figure my life out." I hope he does. I really do. The lawsuit was withdrawn within 2 weeks after their attorney saw the evidence. The house went into foreclosure, then eventually into a short sale that left them with almost nothing. Their car was repossessed. My father took a lower-paying sales job. My mother started working part-time at a property office for someone she used to brag was beneath her. Sienna got a front desk job at a spa and deleted half her Instagram. Noah moved in with 2 roommates and started community college again. As for me, I kept the $88,000. I changed every password, locked my credit, bought extra security for my apartment, and put an offer on a small condo I can afford without anyone's help. I wish I could say revenge felt clean. It did not. Some nights I still grieve the family I wanted them to be. But I do not regret protecting myself. What I learned is something I hope everyone listening remembers. Family is not a free pass to exploit someone. Love is not proven by how much abuse you can tolerate. Forgiveness does not mean erasing consequences, and setting a boundary is not cruelty when the people hurting you keep calling their harm a mistake. Education is not only what we learn in school. Sometimes the most valuable knowledge is learning how to protect your name, your money, your peace, and your future from people who think guilt gives them ownership over you. I used to think choosing myself meant betraying my family. Now I know it meant refusing to betray the woman I fought so hard to become. So tell me honestly, if your own family used love as a weapon to take everything you built, would you forgive them? Or would you let the consequences teach the lesson they refused to learn?